Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Here we are again. The day is Wednesday, and that means it's time for another Leadership Toolkit episode. I'm very excited today. As you know, on this show, if you are a regular here, we always have these great collaborative conversations. If you're new to the channel, welcome, and make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure you throw some thumbs up on the video here. I'm sure you're going to gain some valuable insights. I have a fan favorite and one of my favorite people on the show today. I'm bringing back from Grow Up Leadership, my good buddy Ian MacLeod. Hey, and so we get into these conversations. We're going to be talking about we've got some stuff we're going to be talking about today. In case there are people out here that don't know you, Ian, if you would just take a minute and kind of jam on it, share who you are, what's your leadership experience, why should people listen to you? I know you're an absolute expert and you are very charismatic, very genuine, and just an amazing human being. I'm excited that you're on the show today.
Thanks, Mike, for having me on. As always, man, it's good to hang out and chat with you. So again, my name's Ian MacLeod. I provide leadership training services to individuals, businesses with a focus on fundamentals of performance management, mostly. Leveraging 15 years of management experience that culminated to a senior role. I had about 5 large teams with about 80 staff reporting up to me at one point. So I gained a lot of firsthand experience with managing employee performance during that time. Also have 5 years experience training and onboarding new leaders. And, I just enjoy studying leadership and psychology concepts and sharing them with the world. Just talking about this stuff is fun, man. So again, appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to chop it up as always.
Absolutely, man. So one of the topics, and we've gotten into some topics. We've gotten into performance management. We've gotten into building trust in the workplace, which actually led to another show with another guest, which was excellent as well. And just some genuine, good foundational leadership stuff. I don't have
Yeah.
another word for it.
Thanks, man. Well, I mean, there's so much to this, right? It's complex. There's a lot of theories, a lot of ideas out there. So there's no shortage of content for sure, or things to discuss, man.
Well, and I think one of the huge advantages in having somebody like you on, Ian, and having you come back is it's more than theory. It's one thing to read the theory of it and read on leadership or take a college course and so forth. It's another to hear from real experienced leaders, people like yourself and the people that come on the show.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I will say, as it's tough. I mean, it's easy to read a book and be like excited about it, and then you go trying to apply the same concept or watch a video, watching some gurus like Simon Sinek, and you get all inspired and excited about it, and then you go back and try to implement that, and it doesn't go the way you want it to. And yeah, the day-to-day of managing people it can be challenging, but I mean, at the same time, super rewarding. It's so much fun. So, I love not only actually practicing it, but enjoyed learning about it and talking about it. And that's the thing. I think in general, you never stop learning, never stop developing as a person. And if you can try to, inspire and motivate others, with that same kind of concept, especially when you're talking about things like feedback. And I mean, that's really your role, is trying to shape people's performance and develop them as a transformational leader. And a big part of that is delivering feedback. And a big part of that is helping people understand that it's about learning. Mistakes are opportunities to learn. Learning from failures is so important. So, if you can emulate that by actually learning yourself, I think you're going to be in a good place.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, I mean, that brings us to the meat of the show. It's interesting when you're talking about, and you said, hey, it's one thing to read it, but then when you get into actually performing those actions, and one of those difficult actions, as you bring up, is certainly it's feedback. It's offering feedback, both positive and negative. Positive feedback is certainly way easier to give, right? Lots of hugs and high fives, the way that I look at it. And negative feedback is something that's absolutely necessary, like you said, for people to grow. So let's dive right into it, and let's talk about some, giving feedback to either peers or followers. And what's your preferred approach? How do you start that conversation, Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of different approaches to that in terms of different models. The one I like to go with is it's very simple. You just establish the issue. So you're establishing what the behavior was, and then you're listening. What you're listening for is you're listening for, do they understand the impact that that
Mm-hmm.
behavior had, that situation had? And then the big thing you're really listening for is, uh, are are they committed to resolve? Right? Are they committed to resolve it? And it might be something as simple as maybe they didn't do this simple process, or I mean, the hilarious, funny one. If
Mm-hmm.
anybody's seen Office Space, the movie, is the TPS report cover letter, thing that kept coming up, right?
Yeah.
And simply just sharing the feedback. Hey, you forgot to put the cover letter on the TPS report, so that kind of thing. Um, that's if the person basically understands the impact and then commits to resolve. Yep, Lumberg, I got it. Stop there. That's commitment to resolve. Once you got that, and I will say, probably, if there's one takeaway from this whole podcast, is once you get commitment to resolve, stop there. Seriously, like, don't keep going, because and it's easy to keep going and keep pushing. Yeah, well, just want to make sure you knew about this thing, and this has this
Dude,
impact,
I
and this
got
thing
it.
that, yeah. No, well, I know you got it, Mike, but just want to make sure you really got it, and
Yes,
there's
sir.
this
Really
has an
got it.
issue, and it's just back and forth, right? And in the movie, Lumberg keeps going, and I got it, Lumberg, and then of course, then other managers show up, and hey, just wanted to make sure you knew about we're putting the cover sheet on the TPS
TPS.
reports, and so it just keeps going. And now all of a sudden, what you've done is you've demonstrated that you don't trust that person, right? You There's now this they don't trust you as a leader, as an able person to deliver feedback, and you're demonstrating that you don't trust that they get it, or they care, or what have you, to implement that feedback. So I will say that's probably the easiest form process of delivering feedback. Now, there are doesn't mean that everybody's always going to receive it as well, and that's a whole nother discussion, or we could go deeper into that. But that's
Well,
a
and just
model I
to
would follow.
no, absolutely. And just to repeat, because I always sort of take, as everyone knows, I take notes and then I repeat it back. If you're somebody that's listening to the podcast, or if you're watching the show, gives you an opportunity to cap from a couple perspectives. So you're saying, hey, number one, and this is more for negative or growth needed feedback, let's call it, right? This isn't necessarily positive feedback, because in positive feedback, you're not necessarily going to have an issue, if you will. I don't think, you correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you could still. I think even when it's positive, if you can provide more specifics, more behaviors about what they're doing right, like, instead of just saying, Ian is organized, a trait or a characteristic, you can say very specific things. Ian does a great job of keeping track of his milestones, using a calendar, a to-do list, very specific things, where then I understand those behaviors that I need to continue to reinforce and continue to demonstrate, so that I can be successful. So I think
Oh, that's good.
it can still be helpful, again. And then, I mean, in a sense, yeah, I mean, if now, if somebody doesn't understand that, or something like that, then I guess that's a whole nother discussion. But yes, I will say positive feedback way easier than negative feedback, for sure.
Well, and one of the things, and I put it here in the show notes in the comments here, it said you just said establish the issue, and then you have to listen and commit to and look for the commitment to resolve.
Right.
One of the big keys there, sandwiched in between those, and we'll talk about sandwich feedback in a minute, is the fact of listening. I think as leaders, if you're going to give positive feedback, listen to the results. If you're going to give negative feedback, listen to what it is that the results, what do they need from you and so forth. And then commitment to resolve, I think, can look different in both ways. One of the things that I just picked up on, because I was really focused on and thinking, oh, this is more for negative feedback. Hey, here's the problem. Tell me what you need from me. How can we resolve it? And so on and so forth. And then allow them to respond. But in the positive feedback world, equally so, like that could be really cool. Like, hey, Ian, man, you're fantastic at your organizational skills, using the calendar, like you're never missing a beat and so forth. Hey, would you do me a favor? Tell me how you're able to accomplish that. Right.
Yeah,
And like
perfect.
that can be a huge question because you're still employing that listening piece. Right.
Yeah,
And then, the commitment to resolve in that case is way easier because it's like, dude, keep doing that. High five. Right.
absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
the more you can have them self-identify their behaviors. Uh, I mean, that is going to be the biggest driver. People are way more willing to do something, and there's actually some psychology, some science behind that. But people are way more willing to do something if they come up with those ideas on their own. So if you can coach those things out of them, asking them questions, what did you do? What were those? What were those kind of key behaviors, those vital behaviors that you demonstrate to be successful? And then even further, you might even encourage that person, can you show that to this other person who might be
mhm.
struggling with this, or to the team? That's just even going to further reinforce those great behaviors.
I always like to, yeah, I agree with you. And I always like to, when somebody is struggling, right, we usually will ask them what they're struggling and then we listen, like you said. And the commitment to resolve, sometimes if they want to resolve it, but they don't necessarily have the solution, then that becomes some of our responsibility as leaders to, hey, let me offer you the solution. So we're always offering options. Well, what if you tried this? What if you tried this? What if you tried this? I've found on the positive side of the spectrum, when I'm talking to somebody about something they're doing well and I say, hey, how were you able to accomplish that? I will always encourage them to write down their own things. Hey, why don't you write down 5 or 10 things that allowed you to accomplish that? And then
Nice.
just let them put it in their drawer. Because one of the things that is very, very powerful for somebody, and this is when you're in the trenches, you're an actively functioning manager or leader in your business or somebody else's business. If they've written something in their own hand down here, right? There's a lot of power in that, because then let's say that they sway a couple months from now and they're struggling. You can always say, hey man, pull that notepad out of your top right drawer. I want you to review the things that you were kicking ass with.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that and help put them back in that mental state from where they came from. Just
absolutely.
as
There's actually and maybe we'll hopefully we're okay to nerd out a bit about this. There's
let's
actually
go.
a concept called cognitive dissonance,
Hmm.
and basically you can flip that to where then again where somebody is saying things out loud, writing those things down, or even better, if they're teaching somebody else, they will
Hmm.
have essentially it's kind of like hypocrisy, or they at least have integrity, that they want to continue with those things that they have now said out loud or taught somebody else. So
Right.
that kind of leads where I was hoping to go with the conversation, which I think, obviously we can talk more about the mechanics of delivering feedback, but I think one of the challenges that a lot of folks that I talk with, that they come up against, is that they give somebody feedback and then this person pushes back, right? They're not receptive to the feedback.
Sure.
And I think it's important to understand the psychology behind that. So if you're okay to go down this
Yeah,
path
let's
with
go, man. I
um,
love it.
so
Because I experience, pause here for just a second. I
yeah,
experience it myself. When I'm giving somebody feedback, I think, well, hey, they know, like, and trust me. They should just receive it and like, let's make it happen, right?
yeah.
That, and a lot of leaders, type A personalities, expect that. So, no, I would be really interested to hear your take on, okay, well, how do you make people more receptive to that?
So there's actually, so a psychologist, her name's Lauren Escrees Winkler, and I'll try to I'll try to send over a link to some of this information.
Yeah,
But
that's awesome.
so she conducted research, and she actually did this, what she called a facing failure game. So it's more about how we really receive failure. I mean, the reality is people don't receive negative feedback well. When they receive negative versus positive, they're just less likely to recall the information for changing the behavior. and it's probably mostly ego that's getting in the way. So this facing failure game, what they did was they took contact center staff, and some other groups too, and they conducted, kind of redid this research over and over again. But they had this multiple choice test, and it only had two answers, so A or B, right? It's multiple choice, A or B, either it's this one or that one. And they went through each test question with the participants, and then they were given feedback with the answers. So there's only two answers, so you should learn at the same rate, whether you get it right or you get it wrong. If I was doing the test and you told me, and I chose B, and you said no, the answer was A. If you ask me the question again, I should be able to recite, oh, I messed up. The answer is A.
Right.
Unfortunately, it seems very simple, right? What they did was that they took these participants through and they took the test again. And in the areas where they initially got it wrong, they scored significantly lower. They scored basically 50% of the time, meaning it's the same as guessing, because it's just A or B. So essentially, these people didn't learn from failure. And so they, in the research, they actually conducted similar studies, did this again and again and again. And they found that people just don't seem to learn from their failures. Of course, it's super interesting, right? And unfortunately, we have this strong desire to be competent, but we often ignore failure and we push back. And a lot of that has to do with this cognitive dissonance. So there's a psychologist, Elliot Aronson. He's a famous psychologist, came up with this concept of cognitive dissonance. I don't know if you've heard this term or not, but it's basically our mind can't hold conflicting beliefs or attitudes, particularly about yourself or your behavior. So say, an example that Elliot Aronson uses quite often is you have a student who is going off to trying to go to medical school, has this test that they need to take to get into medical school. They, kind of spaz out, freak out. They unfortunately have a mental block, whatever it may be, in there, and they know that they can't remember, and so they have this opportunity though to cheat, and in their mind they know cheating's bad. Either they can choose to cheat and go off to medical school and be successful in medical school and all of that stuff, or they can stick with their kind of moral that cheating's bad, and I'm going to go off and feel good about myself that I didn't cheat. Either way, what will happen, either if the student chooses to cheat or the student doesn't choose to cheat, they will rationalize that decision, right? They will justify whatever decision they made, and that's cognitive dissonance. So if you think about someone at work, right? If you're getting criticism at work, it oftentimes will go against what we believe in ourselves. So I know all the things I do right. I'm sitting here, I'm showing up to this job, I'm working hard, I'm trying, I care about the job, I care about the work I'm doing. And now you're telling me, by giving me this negative feedback, that I don't. You're telling me that I don't care. You're telling me that I'm no good. And then, so either in my mind, I can't, it's that challenge of, I have this image of myself, and now what you're telling me, it does not connect. And so I have cognitive dissonance where either I don't accept your feedback, or I can't accept that maybe I'm not as great as I think I am. And so you can go either way. And so that's oftentimes why you see people react the way they do. And unfortunately, either they react that I'm going to reject your feedback, or they might react in a different way of, well, I guess I am really bad at this job, and I'm just going to kind of give up, and I'll never be good enough, And so it's unfortunate that really gets in the way, and so it's an ego. So I know I'm kind of going on here, but
no, I think you're spot on. I enjoy this kind of conversation.
So the fascinating thing, though, and what's fascinating is both the psychologist Lauren Eskery's Winkler with her facing failure game, and then also Elliot Aronson previously in different ways with working with changing public behavior. Both of them. So Eskeres Winkler, she took that facing failure game and she tweaked it, right? So instead, what they did was they have that same test, right, where it's A or B, and either you're right or you're wrong. Ideally, you should be learning from your successes and your failures equally, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, they're not. So what they did was they tweaked it where they had the same test, but they just added another participant, and it's just another person looking over the shoulder, right? So all of a sudden, someone's looking over the shoulder of that participant, and that person was then helping them in a way. That person was easily able to extrapolate from both successes and failures equally. So they learn. So then all of a sudden, when they would go through that first example, the first test, and then they would go through the second test, they would score 100% because they had this person, because ego was removed from it. And now all of a sudden I can see, okay, if you tell me that I got the answer wrong, but somebody behind me, Mike behind me, can see that even though my ego is in the way, now Mike can see, okay, Ian got it wrong. A is the right answer. And so that person, now you're removing the ego, and now they're able to learn from both failure at the same rate as success.
Just to clarify, you're saying the person behind them is able to score 100?
So so they now were kind of a team in a sense, right?
Gotcha.
So I'm the one still doing the test, and now I have somebody kind of just added to the mix, and that
like a
person,
feedback coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And because that person now is, and we see this all the time, right? Like when to your point about, I'm giving you this feedback, just implement it and improve. It's that simple to you, because your ego as a leader, as a manager, your ego, you're not upset with them. You just, hey man, here's some feedback.
It doesn't affect my belief system.
Right.
It's just like, hey, I'm seeing this. No, I think that's really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, and so just understanding that. What's fascinating is, so then they took this even further. And again, sorry to keep nerding out, but
I love it.
Pretty interesting stuff. So then they took this even further. They took kind of the same idea, right? And then also Alien Aronson has done some similar tests with this too. But they did further research, and what they did was they had students at like a high school level or middle school level, something like that, and they separated them in two groups. So one group, you could either get advice from a teacher. This was about how to study techniques and how to be better at homework practices, that kind of thing. So either you get to meet with your teacher and you get advice from a teacher, or you yourself have to give that advice to another student, right? So you have to teach somebody else that. So again, split up the group, both groups one's getting advice from a teacher, one, they are actually actively giving that advice to somebody else. The students who gave advice about instead of receiving from teacher, they astronomically increased their homework and studying substantially over those who received advice from the teacher. So they themselves not only build confidence, but again, it goes back to now what Alien Aronson refers to as the hypocrisy paradigm or integrity paradigm. So once I've told you to do this thing, I now have cognitive dissonance. I can't have the competing kind of idea inside. So now I have to now demonstrate this myself. And so if you can get your employees to teach other people, mentoring, sharing it with the team, that kind of thing, that's really where you're going to see a huge difference as far as them actually applying those behaviors. If again, in any way, if you can create kind of this learning environment, you'll be much better off.
No, I think that's awesome. And it is in depth. I think that's one of those pieces that shows how well versed you are in learning the stuff. Like I love sitting here listening to you.
Thanks,
to you share that information, because you articulate it so well. And a couple of things for those of you listening. As a reminder, please do make sure and throw a thumbs up on the video. Share this with somebody. If you're in a role, or if you know somebody that needs to get better maybe at giving feedback, share this episode with them, right? And you can connect with Ian there at Linktree. I always want to say linktree.com, but it's linkter.ee
Right.
forward
It's kind of weird.
slash grow dot up op.
Yes,
So people can connect with you there to see all the things like
absolutely.
you got an amazing YouTube presence,
Thanks,
got
man.
an amazing website where people can connect and hire you to teach this stuff. And certainly always love your TikTok. It's the lighter side of Ian. It's
I,
the lighter side of Ian
man,
MacLeod.
you got to bring in some humor. I mean, it's work is a silly place. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So I want to recap a little bit of what you
Yeah.
said, because one of there's something that I hear is when you're talking about this, like it can get very cerebral, and we can
Hmm.
think as leaders, man, there's so much. One of the biggest things that I heard you say is sort of aligns with personal congruency, right?
Hmm.
If I am equal to what, like, I'm saying this, and since I'm saying it, that becomes my belief system. I have to make sure that I represent myself that way, physically, mentally, emotionally, type of deal.
Right.
So that cognitive dissonance is, maintaining that personal congruency, because you can't go against what you have taught or what you believe.
Right.
That's what I take from that. Mine is the Mike Phillips study from listening to you, because it's so interesting when you pair people up in like you're saying, in a mentorship role. You have somebody staring over their shoulder, and all of a sudden they do better. You have people that are collectively working towards the same goal, and I think that's some of the most powerful environments that we can build as leaders. Is how do we build these team members up and not just tear them down all the time with our feedback.
So, and and you're absolutely right. I mean, this is kind of what is interesting that was found from these concepts. And here's the thing: a lot of times these psychologists, right, they're doing this research looking at in general, like
Right.
why do people how do people deal with failure, how do people deal with different behaviors, right? They're not looking at it from necessarily a just a work related viewpoint, but because we as leaders and as managers of people are dealing with, really, I mean, the only thing we can control is ourselves, right? So
Sure.
we're dealing with how people behave. So it's so important to try to pull what this research, and the beauty of it is, I mean, I didn't go do any of this research. I mean, these people spent years and years, substantial effort to figure these things out. And it's really fascinating. I think that as we continue on, as research continues on with psychology, there'll be more and more things that we can then take from their findings and apply in the workspace. And a lot of it's being done. I mean, that's really what you look at, like Adam Grant or Brene Brown or people like
Hmm.
that. I mean, they are coming from that world and bringing those ideas.
And it is important to know that, once you go from that theory to actually applying it.
Yeah.
I have two or three specific questions I really want to get to, and tied in with that, when we're talking about feedback,
Yeah.
how can you ensure, like you in a leadership role, and for somebody listening to this that's in a leadership or a management role, what are some steps they can take to ensure that their feedback is very specific and
Mm,
action based? So, because like I think you said earlier too, we want to focus more on the behavior and the results than somebody's individual personality traits. And I think that's
absolutely.
really important to acknowledge. Like, what's the behavior that's taking place? What's the result you did or didn't get? So, in that case, what are some maybe suggestions or some steps that you might suggest, Ian, to say, well, hey, do this, and you can keep it specific and actionable?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I see this is often, and that's where I was hoping our conversation would go. If you're getting somebody who is resisting to feedback,
Hmm.
you may need to actually check yourself to make sure your feedback is appropriate, is helpful, is beneficial. Are your expectations realistic, and particularly, are they something that someone can understand, right? One of the biggest challenges I see is oftentimes people are giving feedback and they're giving them on these kind of ambiguous things, right? So like,
Sure.
you know, uh, we need you to demonstrate more empathy, or need you to build rapport with a customer. Hey, you demonstrate, you need to be more professional. Well, what the hell does any of that mean? Sorry, I mean,
Yeah, for those that are listening, they couldn't see my eye roll when you said demonstrate more empathy, because it's like, what does that mean? You're
I
exactly
mean,
right.
it means so many different things to different people. And so I think it's really important to get down to what those specific behaviors are before you go. And so if you can provide a specific situation, hey, in this situation, you said this and this person reacted that way, that can help them at least understand, hey, this kind of situation, being professional, right? Like, I mean, okay, what does that mean? Do I need to change how I'm what I'm wearing or how I'm speaking? Well, during our meetings, you keep making jokes. Well, okay, so now we're getting a little bit further on. Okay, I'm interrupting the purpose of this meeting. In my view, I'm trying to make light of the situation, make it a fun environment, but maybe people are viewing it as now I'm being unprofessional. And so now if we can get more specific of, okay, what does that mean, and how is that impacting people? Well, that's causing people to just not want to contribute in this meeting. And so then I can start to understand, maybe I don't need to do this, um, or I need to change my behavior. If you're having trouble, I will say, if you're having trouble understanding what what are those things that somebody needs to do, like, it's sometimes easy to see the negative side of
Hmm.
that. So like, this is causing this outcome to not be achieved. If you can find the the positive deviants, the people who are doing this well, right? Like, the work well, they're being successful. What are those then? Look at what are those behaviors that they're doing? What are those vital behaviors that they're demonstrating consistently, that they're incorporating in their work to be successful? How are they building rapport, instead of just saying, you know, we need everybody to have great customer rapport. Well, again, I don't know what that means. So at least find those people who do have great rapport, and what are the things that they're saying, in those interactions, in their communication.
Here's a couple things that I'm hearing. One, and again, you repeated this. I'm going to repeat it again for anybody, because if they're listening to this show and saying, "Hey, this is how I'm going to base my feedback model on," it's important to focus on the behaviors, not the people. You don't want to go in and offer someone feedback, be like, "Oh man, Mike, why can't you be more like Ian? He's more right." You inadvertently are going to create this adversity and this frustration in a workplace. So look at
Yeah,
what's the behavior. And the
right.
other thing is, we've all heard it said, who was it? Stephen Covey, that said, begin with the end in mind. Is that,
Hmm.
right? So
Absolutely.
begin with the end in mind, right? So when you're offering feedback, and so what that means to me, what that means to us in business is, what is the result I want, and work my way backward to how do I get there, right? What's the result? What is this result sitting here? What are the then tactics that I have to engage in? What are the strategies I need to employ, and so forth? Well, when you're giving feedback, I think it's important just to be as direct. I think one of the things that we often do is we dance around it, right? Because it's uncomfortable. Most of the time when we're talking about feedback, most of the time it's because immediately our minds go to the negative, and we
Hmm.
go, well, this is hard to do. So it's the same thing, but rather than begin with the end in mind, look at the end result, right? What was the outcome? Positive or negative outcome, doesn't matter. What was the outcome?
Hmm.
And then work your way back into, okay, well, what are the activities that got us that outcome? And those activities are what you're offering feedback on, and you're being direct, because I think that's something that allows us to be specific as well. Hey, we did not achieve our goal of this.
Yeah.
The reason we did not achieve our goal of this is because, but whatever those items are, you used the example in the meeting for just a minute ago. So it was, hey, I'm offering this meeting on how to do this thing, and people were unable to hear because you were continuing to crack jokes.
Yes.
That is a specific action that somebody can take note of, they can hear you, and that they can change. And so you kind of work your way backward in that same sense. In my opinion, one of the biggest keys, though, when we're talking about, okay, being specific and actionable, you have to be really direct.
Well, and
Don't
100%.
dance with it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think the thing is, though, if you can, people can change a behavior, and people can understand that, that this is just, I could do this differently, or I could say this differently. If you lead with a trait or a characteristic like good rapport, or you're a good communicator, or you're empathetic, or you're professional or unprofessional, well, that's now you're assassinating my character, and that's a whole nother thing. Obviously, people are going to clearly react, and again have that cognitive dissonance of, I don't think I'm unprofessional, but now you're saying I am, versus very specific behaviors that I demonstrated in the meeting, that I could easily change. Hey, Ian, don't make jokes during this meeting, whatever, it was distracting. Okay, I can get behind that easily. There was a difference, something that in my previous work, and I've used this with other places too. Oftentimes when they're talking about, interacting with customers, or just in general communication, rapport, or tone, or positive communication, those are the terms sometimes that they're using as far as evaluating folks. Unfortunately, it's very hard to know what that means, and how to demonstrate that. So we had some very straightforward behaviors that we were asking people to do when they were interacting with the customer. One was to express a willingness to help. So I'm happy to help you with this. To acknowledge concerns. So I understand, this was a
I
challenge.
appreciate, I hear you.
I hear you, that kind of thing. To clarify their needs. So I understand you're needing this, or this is what, we can do. And then just explain your next steps. So, I'm going to get some information from you. I'm going to place you on hold, or I'm going to go check with somebody, or I'll get some more information, and to some resources for that, or whatever it is, or I'll fix your problem. Those four things, again, acknowledging their concerns, expressing a willingness to help, clarifying their needs, and explaining your next steps, were specific behaviors that someone could do, and that ultimately led to having great rapport with their caller. Right?
Do me a favor, repeat that for me. You said
Yeah.
acknowledge, express, clarify, and what was the fourth one?
And explain next steps.
Explain next steps. I'm just taking that down because that's good.
Oftentimes, I will say, like in a customer service situation, right? You call someplace and you're like, hey, I got these problems, I got these issues, I got all this stuff going on. And they're like, okay, what's your name? What's your number? Hold, please.
Right.
And you have no idea what's happening,
And
right?
then you're sitting over there stewing,
Yeah.
frustrated.
And then you're like, are they going to transfer me, or is they going to hang up? I don't know what's happening. And then they come back and they might fix your problem completely, but you have no idea, because they didn't explain anything. So that
Sure.
explaining next steps, I think, can be really helpful.
That's really good.
Again, those are behaviors. Those are specific behaviors that can lead towards creating better communication, creating better rapport, versus saying, hey, we need you to have better rapport with your customers.
If you could just be more professional and have better rapport with people, it'd make it easier for all of us.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. It's subjective.
It totally subjective. It's just, you need to try to make it as objective as possible. And I will say too, I think that's where then, when you have a lot of subjective feedback, a lot of subjective evaluation, then that creates all these other problems where it's confusion. People don't know what to do with that. People also, then that starts creating this feeling of like, it's not fair. I don't, and then they start having this differences of like, well, this person gets this feedback or treated this way, or I see this person doing this, and they're,
Sure.
I see this person being unprofessional, and because again, professionalism means different things to different people.
And then they start justifying it to themselves for what fits their model of the world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I got two other questions, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide which one to ask first. So one, we talked a minute beforehand, because you and I are both fans of very direct feedback. Okay, let me give you this, and let me tell you exactly where we're at. And there is an approach, and I'm curious what your take is, called the sandwich approach of leadership.
Yeah.
So the sandwich approach, let me spread this out like on sandwich bread for everybody, right? I probably was a rapper in a
Uh,
past life. So
nice.
the sandwich approach is, okay, let me give you this really good thing that you're doing, right? Let me butter you up a little bit. Then I'm going to tell you all the things that you're messing up on. I'm going to sandwich it in there, and then on the other side, I'm going to tell you, but I still love you, and you're still doing a really great job, right? That's the sandwich approach in a in a nutshell. Oh, here comes Ben. He says, "Don't get me started on the feedback sandwich." Right, the feedback sandwich, the sandwich approach. So, what is your opinion of that approach, and why?
So, just a little history. The feedback sandwich was actually developed like in the 80s or something. It became kind of a popular thing, 80s and 90s. And that was a result of so many managers for so long never sharing any praise or appreciation. And so they said, hey, when you have all your negative feedback for your people, because you seem to have a lot, can you at least add in, some positive, and that'll make the situation so much better. Unfortunately, the reality is that it oftentimes can really muddy and bury the feedback, because usually what you're doing is you have negative or constructive feedback for somebody, right? You have this negative feedback, and now you're trying to put these nice pieces of white bread
No, no,
positivity
it's
on
called it's called "I love you" bread.
I love you, bread. I love you so much, but you suck, but I love you, that kind of thing. I
Right.
mean, it confuses the message. Instead, really what you should be doing, two things I will say, and this kind of also will bring us back to where I was kind of going with the whole cognitive dissonance and that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
But instead, you should be creating an environment where you should be routinely sharing positive feedback. There's I apologize. I can't remember the person's name, but there's actually somebody who's done some research and found that for every one negative interaction that you have with somebody, in
Hmm.
order to develop at least a decent relationship, you need to have three positive interactions with them. So you really should be providing positive, reinforcing kind of feedback. Praise, appreciation, but even getting more specific about that positive kind of feedback, um, and doing that routinely to build that person up. And so then when you have negative feedback, it's not that big of a deal, right? Because you've already developed this trust in this relationship, and they feel valued, and that's really what people want, is they want to feel valued. But the other thing I will say too is, if
Hmm.
you can change the narrative in general to all of this, to be learning instead of worrying about performing. um, Brene Brown uses this kind of phrasing, but the goal is not perfection. The goal is learning and growing. So instead of being the knower and the be right, be the learner and the get it right, or growing and learning
Hmm.
versus proving and perfecting, that kind of thing. Really just treating the environment as we're all learning together. Nobody's perfect. This is all steps towards our larger goal, our larger purpose, that kind of thing too. People can typically be more accepting of constructive feedback.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it has to come from a place of being genuine too. If it's just constantly, if you're when you're saying, "Hey, offer three pieces of positive and one negative," it can't come from a place of, "Well, hey, let me set you up because I want to give you this really positive thing. High five you, and you're doing great. Hey, you're a great organizational guy, man. I love your communication. By the way, you suck."
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Because they know it's coming, and I'm talking, days before, or early hours before, however that looks like it. All of that positive praise, it has to come from a place of genuine appreciation. Like,
Right.
there's no replacement for genuine appreciation. So I got here's my final question for you for the day, because we've talked a lot about feedback.
Yes.
How do you follow up on feedback to track somebody's progress and know that they are moving in a direction that is the direction you want them to head in?
It's a great question. I think another thing I see organizations struggle with, or leaders struggle with, is that they ideally you should have some sort of performance management system in place where you are able to you're setting expectations, right? You're setting clear expectations. This is what I expect out of
Yep.
you, kind of thing. And then being very transparent. This is how I'm going to evaluate that, and then I'm providing feedback based on those evaluations on a routine basis. And so that's, then how you would be following up, right? So you should be then, okay, next month when we meet, we'll, of course, this, I'll continue to look at your performance in this area. Ideally, that's performance management, and that's what I would encourage everyone to try to build out a system like that. And so you're
Hmm.
looking at things like quality of their work, productivity or efficiency of their work, that kind of thing. Sorry, you're gonna.
I was just going to say, is monthly enough? I mean, because I feel like I would, for me, I do it more often. But I'm coming from the
Yeah,
small business world too. Like for me, if and here's something else. Here's a quick tip, right? Google Calendar is your friend, folks.
yeah,
If Ian and I are talking and I'm giving him feedback or he's giving me feedback or whatnot, I promise you, if you say, "Hey, we'll follow up on this in the future," let's say today's Monday or Tuesday, and we'll follow up in the future and so forth, and I'm giving Ian that feedback, Ian's going to sit there and wait to be like, is he really going to follow up on that feedback, or is it just going to be the flavor of the month thing because I wasn't doing this right? And if it's me, I would put a 15-minute check-in next Monday with Ian.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Hey, dude, that thing we talked about last week, it's this. How's that going for you? How's it working?
yeah. And I think that's the thing. You're going to need to set your own cadence as far as how often you're meeting, what you're talking about, that kind of thing. I will say in my previous work as a senior manager and even supervisor, we had large teams where you had 15 people. So meeting with everybody once a month was or maybe twice a month was
Sure.
challenging already. So I think that's the thing, is figuring that out. Now in that same system, we were routinely evaluating people's performance, right? And so then again, you're creating this kind of expectation that not only are we expecting you to perform at this kind of level, whatever that may be, but we're going to be evaluating it, and we're going to be talking about that routinely, whatever the routine may be. To your point, though, and I think where you were going, regardless, if you're providing somebody feedback or coaching or what have you, you should always kind of in some way have some sort of follow up process. Absolutely. I mean, you can't just say something one time and then leave it alone. And that's why people feel like, those yearly annual performance reviews are no good if you only talk to your staff
Right.
one time a year about their performance. That's not a way to manage.
Well, it's like for example, if you let somebody get out and around, right, and things aren't working right at work. I like to compare a lot of stuff to weight loss because I feel like that's relatable to a lot of folks.
Sure.
If I need to lose 30 pounds, I don't go to the gym one time and go, man, I'm glad that's done. Whew,
Yeah,
I'm glad that's done. And I go step on the scale and go, what the hell? Nothing changed,
right.
right? It has to be a consistent process, whatever that process looks like for you. I think you're spot on with, hey, set your own cadence, because they could say, oh, well, Mike said do it once a week and Ian said do it once a month, and whatever it is. I think anytime you're, and again, from my experience and some of what I'm hearing you say right now, if I'm going to take the time to offer somebody feedback, I need to be respectful enough to offer them closure for that feedback,
Hmm.
whatever that closure looks like. Maybe it's meeting once a week, maybe it's meeting one more time to see where we're at. And that's both for positive and negative. If I give them positive feedback and I say, hey, great job, it's still worth going back. People still like to hear the positive things that they're winning at, right?
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%.
So we are we're at about just over the 45-minute mark. I'm curious. I love these conversations with you, man. It's so easy to lose track of time, and we could sit and talk.
Man,
I always jot down a few questions and a few thought starters, and we usually make it to like one or two, just because you have such a wealth of knowledge, such an
yes, man.
expertise. It's easy to get into that and start talking, and it's like, hey, let me give you this. You could build a whole performance management system for people live on a show one time, right?
Man, I mean, I love this stuff. So, I keep, like I said, I keep learning and I love sharing it. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
man, it
So,
went by fast.
any final thoughts to take us out today, my man?
Um, I think again, the takeaway I would say is when delivering feedback, when you are delivering that feedback, just know that if you already know that people's ego is going to get in the way, and it's not even it's not intentional. It's just, again, that cognitive dissonance is a real thing. So if you can flip that cognitive dissonance to another way, where they are now in their own way, they are now responsible for sharing, their own knowledge, and sharing that with somebody else, or maybe you're the one who they're now giving feedback to, or something like that. They're teaching you. Those kind of opportunities can really make a huge difference, as far as them not only feeling like they understand this and now they'll practice this thing, but they also feel valued and like they're part of the team. And it's not just, this kind of top down exercise where somebody's just getting after me all the time. So again, make it collaborative, make it in a learning environment, make it feel like teamwork. And I think, your feedback will go a long way for sure.
Absolutely. That's great stuff, Ian. Uh, Thank you again for joining me today. Just as a reminder for anybody, I'm going to throw it on the screen real quick here. I had it up there a little bit. If you want to connect with Ian, you can go to GRO dash leaders dash up.com. Connect with Ian there. He does leadership consulting and education, great at performance management. Great guy to talk to. As you can tell, if you're looking for consulting for your business, check him out for sure.
Thanks.
And with that, absolutely, man, it's easy when you're that good. It's easy.
I
I'm
appreciate
gonna
it.
I'm gonna go ahead and take us out for the day. And for everybody that tuned in to the Leadership Toolkit today, thank you so much. I value your time. I genuinely value your time. We try and always bring great collaborative conversations like this on the show. I'd encourage you to go back and check out some of our other shows. I've got the titles and information there. There is a wealth of information from many different leaders and managers across multiple verticals of business that you can grow yourself, and in turn it allows you to grow your whole team and the people around you. I thank you so much for your time today tuning in with us. Make sure and do me a favor, share this show. Make sure you're subscribed and join us every Wednesday at 12:05 p.m. Mountain Time. Until I see you next, be great. We'll talk soon, everybody.